Hey everyone, welcome back to the Mentor Me podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Hall, and today's guest was Jeb Blount. If you're not familiar with Jeb, Jeb is a sales guru. He's written multiple books on the topic of sales and goes into different facets of selling, including the book that we discuss that's called Fanatical Prospecting. And we also discuss on this podcast the changes that we've seen over the past year and a half in the sales industry with less in-person meetings, more Zoom meetings, more social selling, and even selling moving to social media and how to use those platforms to help you sell. So I hope you enjoy this episode with Jeb Blount.
Well, I would say I stumbled into sales, and I wasn't a person that was searching for the next thing to do. So that really wasn't my path. I decided I found that sales fit me very well when I was in high school because I worked on the yearbook and I sold yearbook ads. And I was the number one ad salesperson on the yearbook, and that led me to become the yearbook editor, which told me that if you can make it rain, people will give you, higher positions, that type of thing. So I was able to learn from that, and then pretty much everything that I went in after that was in sales. It just worked very well for me. I was good at it. It made sense to me, and the younger me was incredibly ambitious. I used to listen to Jim Rome's. He had a program called an audio program called Ambition, which was way before your time because it was on these things called cassette tapes that you would plug into your car. But I listened to it so many times that I burned the cassette tapes up, and jumped right out of sales when I was 23 years old. I was running 7 profit centers for Nutrisystem, which was all sales. So I was, I had a really big, leadership role at a very young age, and then jumped into a bigger company from there. So I would say the younger me was a pretty driven human being.
That's incredible. So what did you see in yourself? You mentioned you would listen to Ambition over and over, but what did you notice in yourself early on was working for you as a salesperson? What did you recognize that you were like, oh, I can do this. If I can bring this, to the next level, I can do this as my full-time job.
I don't know that I had that level of awareness where I was seeing things in myself. I mean, you got to imagine, it's just, the thing for me was get to the next level, get to the next level, get to the next level.
Yeah.
I think what made me good early on was I was adaptable. So when you talk to my old sales managers, what they'll tell you is that if I was in a situation and let's say that the path switched to a different path, I was very easy to switch to the next path. A lot of people have that, if you're going down a path with a client and this isn't working, or, the message isn't working, or you run into a dead end and they push back on you, a lot of people they clam up at that point, or they don't know what to say or don't know what to do. For me, it was, okay, well, let's just try this direction. And so early on, I was just really good at working with clients. I was also a perfectionist when it came to selling. So I believe that most sales are won by just a little bit. So just a little bit, we would say you're winning by a nose in horse racing vernacular. So if you're winning by a nose, I was intent on being perfect in every single thing that I did. So all of my presentations, my questions, the way that I went through the sales, the way I prospected, all of those things for me had to be lined up so that I was making the greatest and best impression on my customers, and I was gaining a competitive edge because I was willing to outwork and out-hustle everyone else. And if there was one thing for me as a younger person that I would say that did set me apart, was not that I was the smartest person in the world, because I wasn't, although I am smarter than Anthony Iannarino, just so you know. I know he was on here, but if he's listening, Anthony, and I have hair, so that's super important. But I recognized that even though I may not be the best salesperson, may not be the tallest person because I'm short, and I wasn't the smartest person, I wasn't the fastest person, that nobody could out hustle me. And so early on, it was the ability to outwork people and out hustle people and to dedicate myself myopically to winning deals that really put me ahead of everyone else. And I set all kinds of sales records. I mean, I've got a trophy case full of everything that, that I won, every top ranking, number one person in, 100-year history of the company. I have all those things, but most of it was grind and drive, not necessarily smarts. But the one thing that I did have, and I still have that to some extent, is if we're going down a direction and it doesn't work, I just move to the other direction. So you can, you iterate very quickly in the moment. And I don't know that that was a talent that I necessarily developed. I just think it was just, sometimes there's just God-given talent. Some people can hit a golf ball. I can switch directions in a sales call without,
Sure.
without having to think very hard about it.
So adaptability is a huge thing, especially in this past year. In all the ways sales people have had to adapt into a new way of selling, which is kind of like the virtual selling, maybe not attending trade shows, not seeing people in person. What have you noticed in the past year that through the virtual selling perspective that people have had to get better at and kind of change and really focus on through virtual selling?
Well, communication skills. I mean, you just have to get good at communicating however you have the ability to communicate. So if we think about prior to the pandemic, we've been selling virtually in my company since 13, 14 years. Because when I started the company back in 2007, I mean, we weren't doing video calls like this, but I couldn't get on an airplane and go visit every single customer.
Yeah.
It would be impossible to do that from a money standpoint. So we've been selling by phone and video for a really long time. If you think about prior to the pandemic, almost all of our calls would have been by phone. So even though we sold by phone, almost everything was, or we sold virtually, almost everything was by phone. Following the pandemic, almost everything we do is on a video. So I come in, get mic'd up, and I'm on camera all day long. It's unrelenting. I mean, I'm sometimes 8-9 hours a day. I'm on a video camera, talking with someone. So that shifted, and in fact, there's a report that's came out just recently. McKinsey did a study on how B2B sales has changed, and one of the data points in that particular report was that 76% of buyers, if given the option of a telephone call or a video call, prefer video. And they prefer video because video is more like being there in person. I mean, we're trying to create the closest facsimile as possible of being in person. Even on this call right now, we're on a video call. I'm looking directly into your eyes on my particular video screen because I've got a piece of glass in front of me that you're projected onto. I don't even see the camera. So I've disappeared the camera to create a look that feels like we're together and we're in person. So I think for salespeople, it was a big adaptation from this comfort zone of I'm in a physical presence with someone to I've got to be able to communicate in any channel. And by the way, if you're an inside salesperson and you sold primarily by phone, buyers changed. They didn't want to talk to you on the phone anymore. They want a video call because they want to meet you and they want to put a face with a name. And if you were an outside salesperson and you were used to prospecting by foot, like walking around your territory or showing up in person, suddenly you had to learn how to communicate and turn all your senses on a video call or a phone call. And if you start thinking about that, everybody had to make some sort of a shift. In this paradigm, basically, there were two types of salespeople. There were a group of rainmakers who, like you said earlier, they decided they were going to come out of the pandemic and they were going to be better for it. And there were a group of wishbones, and the wishbones are wishing and hoping they could go backwards. So the rainmakers have begun to future-proof themselves by simply stepping into this and saying, you know what, this just makes it easier. I have all these different ways I can communicate. I can talk with more people. And in sales, the more people you talk with, the more you're going to sell. So if I can talk with more people, I can put more in my pipeline. If I can put more in my pipeline, I can sell more. So they started using this virtual selling paradigm shift to have more conversations, to be more efficient. And by the way, if you're not driving places, and driving is not an accomplishment, suddenly you compress all your time into a shorter amount of day, and you actually can have more time for your family because I didn't have to spend 2 hours each way commuting. I mean, you're from Minneapolis or Minnesota. I don't know if you're from Minneapolis or St. Paul or wherever, but the traffic isn't great there. I've been there and it's awful. And in Atlanta, the traffic's awful. In LA and Washington D.C. I mean, Chicago, take a city. So I don't have to do that anymore. Now I can talk to more people. I can do it in less time. I can have more time for my family. And that's what rainmakers have done this year. And salespeople across the spectrum, companies pick an industry, have had record years. The reports are coming in. Companies have had record years. My company had record years. We doubled the size of our company in this pandemic. And
Wow.
now a training company, right? So that's not supposed to happen. That happened because all of a sudden we just stepped into a new way of communicating.
So you mentioned, we were talking a little bit about virtual selling, and in that you mentioned picking up the phone. Do you think that there's still value? I know you do. What's the value today versus maybe a year ago in picking up the phone versus a virtual call?
So I'm really glad you backed off the still.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
because so the phone is the greatest sales tool that you have in your toolbox. Period. End of story. It has been. It is today. It always will be. And it's even better because everybody's got one in their pocket. We walk around with these things. Now, if you are in sales and you didn't have the mobile phone numbers of all your customers and your prospects, you should be kicking your ass for that, because they're all carrying these things around. I mean, it's 2021.
Yeah.
People have had mobile phones. I got my first mobile phone in the 1980s. Okay, so let's just be clear on this. I mean, in the 1980s, I had a bag phone. So this isn't new. So we all
Right.
have one. And in 1876, Alexander Graham Bell made the very first phone call. And ever since then, right, we've been using the telephone to connect with other people. So the phone, it wasn't still, it is, it will always be. It is the very best way to communicate with people. Now, phone has different meanings these days, because I can be on WhatsApp and have a conversation with someone in India by clicking the phone. I can get on Instagram. If I direct message you on Instagram, I can go to Instagram and I can call you on Instagram. I can call you on Facebook Messenger. I can have a voice conversation with you. These days, I can even meet you in Clubhouse and we can have a private conversation in Clubhouse, but it's still a voice call. It's easy to do and we can do it anywhere, and I don't have to set up a camera to have a phone call. So still is, it is, pick up the damn phone and call somebody. Lord have mercy.
What holds people back from picking up the phone? What is it? Just fear of what people are going to say? They're going to turn them down.
They're afraid of invisible strangers. And I get that. Like, I mean, you know, you call up the phone, you can't see it on the side. Plus, it's an easy excuse. I'm so much better in person. Of course you are. There's no doubt that you're better in person. In person is the very best way for human beings to communicate. It's just not the most efficient way. If you got to get in your car, drive across town, spend 2 hours in traffic, right? Go to the 7-Eleven, get your coffee, go in, have a conversation for 20 minutes and drive all the way back across town. That's not very efficient. In that period of time, I can make 100 outbound phone calls, and I can. So think about this for a second. Pick up the phone. The phone's easy and efficient. It's not always the best way. Sometimes video's better. Sometimes email's better. Sometimes text is better. There's all kinds of different ways. Sometimes sending you a handwritten note is better than calling you and saying thank you. Sometimes those things are true. So what you have to do is start blending all of these different communication channels together to give you the highest probability of getting the sales outcome that you desire at the lowest cost of time, energy, and money. That's what you have to do. But the phone should be central. So a lot of salespeople these days, because they're afraid of invisible strangers, what they do is they default to sending an email. And then they go, well, nobody will answer my emails. Of course not. They just got 100 of those things a day, and your email makes you sound like a schmuck because all you do is talk about yourself.
Yeah.
So why don't you pick up the phone and call people? I mean, my phone never rings anymore because people are afraid to call, but we call all day long, which is one of the reasons why we doubled the size of our business, because we talk with people. And here's the deal. The more people you talk with, the more you're going to sell. It's just that simple.
Yeah. And with more people, like you mentioned, Jeb, emailing, scared to pick up the phone. If you're not scared to pick up the phone, you have a much higher chance of reaching them because everyone else is emailing. I can mention, I probably get 15 emails a day of people that I don't ever plan to respond to because it has nothing to do with me. It has nothing to do with, they don't even know the industry I'm in and they don't care. They're just spamming it. So that's really interesting. So you mentioned, at a young age, you kind of knew you were going into sales. And how do you still build trust in those relationships? Maybe you have an hour meeting with somebody, and I know it's a longer process most of the time to make a sale, but how do you break through the ice and build trust in that first meeting with somebody?
Well, first of all, let's stop breaking through ice. I mean, we're having a break. Breaking through the ice assumes that the person that's meeting with you is frozen like cold ice. I mean, they agreed to meet with you. So, if someone agreed to meet with me, I don't probably have to break the ice. What I need to do is just be a human. So the easiest way to get people to engage is to ask them questions. And if you ask open-ended questions and get them talking, then the ice is essentially broken. People are interested, they're engaged, they're happy, they like you when they're talking and you're not talking. The easiest way to shut down a meeting is to spend the entire time pitching. Nobody wants to be pitched.
Yeah.
So when you just think about it, when you're meeting with people, they're asking 5 basic questions of you. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? Do I trust and believe you? Well, I mean, being likable is dressing well and being polite and showing up on time and doing the things that we do as human beings to show that we respect other people. But the easiest, fastest way to be likable is to listen to someone. And if you think about it, the most unlikable human being in your life is the person that is standing in front of you talking about themselves, right? I mean, so think about that. So if I sit down with you and I ask you easy questions that are open-ended, that are something you want to talk about, then you're going to like me because you're talking. Well, the easiest, fastest way to make someone feel important is to listen to them. And the most insatiable human need is the need to feel significant. So when you make someone feel significant by listening to them, you give them the greatest gift that you can give another human being. And by the way, when you give someone a gift, they feel an obligation to move to the next step with you, which leads to trust. So the more they move to the next step, the more you have an opportunity to build that trust one brick at a time. Now, here's the cool thing. If they're talking and you're listening, they're telling you their story. They're teaching you their language. So what they want to know is, do you understand me? The reason why people tell their story is to be understood. So when I'm able to repeat their story back to them, when I'm able to build bridges and link from the things that they're telling me, their problems, their issues, their aspirations, the opportunities they want to capture, when I'm able to pull that back to them and send that back to them in their language, not mine, so I'm able to produce solutions. That's why those emails that you get don't connect with you, because they're about someone else, not about you.
Yeah.
Right? But if I'm able to go back to them and say, here's what I think you should do based on all these things that you're telling me, all of a sudden they say, wow, you really get me. Do you understand me, right? Do you get me and my problems? And when you get someone in their problems and you demonstrate that, that's when they begin to trust you. Do I like you? Do you listen to me? Do you make me feel important? Do you get me in my problems? Do I trust and believe you? You're answering those questions for the prospect, for your buyer in those situations. And it all begins with asking a question and listening. And here's the one thing that you can take to the bank. A question that you ask is more important than anything that you will ever say in a sales conversation. And anything that you say is more impactful and more powerful when it is delivered in the form of a question.
Wow. It's so countercultural to think that way, because we go in, and I think this is why salespeople can get so nervous before calls too. You are building yourself up and you're like, what am I going to say here? You know, am I going to say this book is flying off the shelves? You got to pick it up. You know, what am I going to say to move this buyer? But I really like what you said. It's about asking, listening, and then being able to repeat it back to them and help them solve that problem, right? I mean, that's really what selling is.
Well, it's organic. So there's a whole lot of people that are spending a lot of time teaching people what to say, but nobody really gives a crap what you say. People only give a crap if you care. And the only way you can show someone you care is to listen to them. So learn to listen. That doesn't mean that you don't need to hone your messaging. So if you want to get the meeting, you need to hone your messaging. When you bridge to a solution, it's important that you hone your messaging. It's just that messaging has to be in their language, not your language. That's the key.
Got it. Well, I want to hop into a couple of your books here. The first one I want to hop into is Fanatical Prospecting. And I feel like prospecting is a thing that people either kind of get or they really don't enjoy doing it, in my experience of sales. What is the reason that certain salespeople's pipeline breaks down?
Well, let's start with prospecting. Nobody likes prospecting. I mean, maybe you do because you're a crazy person like me. I mean, I kind of like prospecting. Most people don't. Prospecting sucks. It's like I like to be skinny, but I don't like to eat a healthy diet and exercise. So, right. So exercising and diet suck. So it's the same thing, right? So if you want to have a big pipeline, you pay for it for that pipeline in advance with prospecting. Yeah. So I think that the biggest thing we have to understand is that if you have an empty pipeline, the reason you have an empty pipeline is you're not prospecting. That's the reason. There's no other reason. It's not the economy. It's not the customer base. It's not your boss. It's not the lead list. It's not those things. It's that you're not prospecting. And big pipelines, which create bigger incomes, are paid for in advance with consistent daily prospecting. So prospecting sucks. Now, let's be clear. There are some salespeople that are so averse to prospecting that they probably shouldn't be in a hunter-based role. So there are people who are good at selling, good at relationships, good at building out and expanding accounts. They should be in account management roles where they're not really looking for new logos. They're working with existing customers.
Sure.
If you want to get into sales and you're new to sales, in most cases, you're going to start off in a hunter role. So even if that doesn't necessarily fit you, in order to get a bigger role where you're not having to prospect anymore the way you did before when you were in the hunter role, you're going to have to prove yourself as a prospector before they're going to let you do that. That's sort of how it works, right? And the way I look at it is, listen, if I can't trust you and you're unwilling to ask for time, because that's all prospecting is, right? It's calling an invisible stranger and asking for time. Sales is asking for commitments, right? But if you can't ask for time, how can I trust you to ask for money? And so that's why your boss, especially when you're young, wants to see that you can prospect and ask for time, and then will trust you to ask for money. That's why in some cases, in some businesses, right, there are SDRs and account executives.
Yeah.
So you have to go through the SDR role before you can become an account executive. The only problem with account executives is account executives think when I got promoted to be an account executive, I don't have to prospect anymore. That is BS, right?
Yeah.
Because you own the pipeline, not the SDR, so you got to prospect. But for most salespeople, prospecting sucks. And anything that sucks, we have a tendency to put off, right? We worry about what we're going to say. We try to get everything arranged in our desk. And a lot of salespeople come in the morning, they get the sticky notes, they get their desktop done. They put their pen at the due north position. Because, Trevor, let me tell you something. When your pen is at due north, right, rejection is a little bit easier. So we plan to make a prospecting call. Then we send a whole bunch of emails and wonder why nothing's happening for us. So it's just that prospecting is hard. It's not easy. And there's people out there that say they can make prospecting blissful or make it easy or take the pain away from it, or you can prospect without rejection, or all those things. Complete and utter, excuse my language, bullshit. Okay, prospecting is hard work. It's a grind. It will always be a grind. It just is.
Yeah.
So there aren't easy buttons. There's no easy way out of this. So you just have to do it. And what you have to decide is, do you want to be successful or not? And if you want to be successful, then you got to prospect. And if you don't want to be successful, don't prospect. It's a really easy prescription.
What do you recommend for a couple tips for people to build better pipelines? Do you recommend, I think you mentioned this earlier, just putting a little time each day into prospecting? Or do you recommend, hey, I'm going to put Thursday this week and I'm going to prospect all day?
Yeah, it's not prospecting day, it's prospecting every day. Okay, so let's think about it. If you have to do something that sucks, would you rather do a little bit of it or a whole lot of it? So this is the problem, right? If Thursday's your prospecting day, for the first 30 minutes, you're probably on, right? And then you start making excuses, and then you get a cup of coffee, and then you're watching cat videos your mom sent you on Facebook because, it was boring. I'm pretty good. Like I break my prospecting blocks up into 15-minute blocks, 15 minutes, right? 15 dial set, one appointment. It just works for me, and I'll do those in power hours. So I'll do like 4 blocks or what have you. I don't want to prospect for 8 hours, and I'm good at it, and I like it, but I don't want to do it that long because it sucks.
Yeah.
So the best thing to do is schedule a little bit of time every single day, first thing in the morning. Don't wait till the afternoon. Get on the telephone first thing and do a little bit every day. For most B2B sales reps, an hour a day is all you really need. Now, if you're an SDR and your job is to prospect all day long, then start off with a phone block, move to, say, social media, email, come back with another phone block, go all the way through your day. Maybe at the end of the day, you just have a voicemail block. And we love voicemail blocks. Like I'll call, and the only reason I'm calling is leave voicemails. But I typically do those at the end of the day when people are less likely to answer their phone. And then the next morning, I'll send an email to them and I'll call them again. So the best thing is a little bit every day, because the cumulative impact of a little bit every day is massive. And the second thing is you want to think about is sequencing. So if you want to do this, so every single day you've got a prospecting block, and you'll probably have multiple. So you want a telephone prospecting block first, then maybe you'll move into email or social media or direct messaging or what have you. Sending video messages works really well. But what I want to do is I want to start with prospecting lists, and then I want to sequence a series of touches on that prospecting list over a certain period of time with a group of interlinked messages that are more likely to connect with you, so that I can improve the probability that the prospect that I'm chasing is going to engage with me because I meet them where they are with the right message at the right time. So as you start thinking about prospecting, think a little bit every day. and then think, how am I layering my touches in a way that improves my probability of connecting with those prospects a little bit every day. But if you have a prospecting day, you're guaranteed to fail, guaranteed.
Yeah, prospecting day, I can relate to what you're saying. All of a sudden you go talk to a coworker for 30 minutes because you're like, well, this sucks. I don't want to be doing this anymore. So I agree with that. I think it has to be scheduled too. I think you have to put in blocks, like you said, even if it's 15 minutes, just put it in your schedule, make sure you get it done.
Thank you so much for listening to this episode with Jeb Blount. If you did enjoy, go let him know on his social media platforms and also give this a rating wherever you listen to podcasts.